Fellas, today we're going to be talking about UFC fighters who had a career-changing year. Now, a career-changing year is essentially a year that kind of made them who they are today or completely boosted their career and everything they did. Now, it's essentially a flawless year. UFC fighters who had a flawless year, and there's been various examples throughout various different years. So we're going to be taking a look at a few examples today. Starting off, well, first of all, before we get into it, we need to say what actually qualifies for a flawless year. So what actually qualifies for a flawless year? Well, first of all, they must not lose in this year. If you lose, it doesn't matter if it's a close decision. If you've lost a fight this year, you can't really call it a flawless year. Do you know what I mean? It has to be completely undefeated. You can't lose a fight, or else then it just wouldn't be flawless. So this year, to boost you, you can't lose a fight. You must fight and win at least twice. You can't just get one finish you can't just get one finish and call it a flawless year, because it's a good finish, but you need to fight multiple times. So I'm going to say they must fight and win at least twice this year. That's well, not this year, but at least twice in whatever year it may be. So yeah, they must fight and win at least twice, more than twice if they want, but they must fight and win at least twice. They must have at least one dominant performance or great finish. They can't just get 2 or 3 boring decision wins. They have to have at least one dominant performance, so a win that kind of made them absolutely obliterate their opponent, or they finish their opponent in great fashion, something like that. And finally, it must boost their career. It could maybe make them popular, like I said. It could give them a title shot. Whatever it may be, it has to boost their career in some way. They can't end the year in the same spot that they were when they started the year, if you know what I mean. So it has to boost their career. But we're going to go in for the first example, and I'm going to go with Sean Strickland for 2023. Here's the thing, guys. Sean Strickland, 2023, he's got 3 wins already. And I say already because we're only in September and Strickland's already got 3 wins. Obviously, he beat Imavov at the beginning of the year. This summer, he absolutely destroyed the Dagestani Abbas Magomedov. And he just got the biggest upset in UFC history, or at least one of the biggest upsets in UFC history, against Israel Adesanya. This year has been absolutely blessed for Sean Strickland. I mean, look at last year. He got KO'd by Alex Pereira and then had a really close robbery loss to Jared Cannonier. And this year he's turned it all around and he's literally the champion. Who would have thought that Sean Strickland's the champion? And by the way, UFC need to update Strickland's PNG. What is that arm? Is that like Glover Teixeira's arm or something? I don't know what that arm is. Looks like Luke Rockhold or Glover Teixeira's arm. But either way, yeah, he's got 3 wins already, and arguably he got the better of one of the biggest upsets in UFC history. No one, and don't pretend in the comments like you thought Strickland was going to win. Nobody thought that Strickland was going to beat Adesanya. It's the biggest upset in UFC history for me. He's now the champion. He started the year as nothing more than a contender. To be honest, when he entered the year, no one even thought he'd be coming close to a title shot, and now he's the champion. And he's one of the biggest stars in the sport now. Not only is he the champion, he's one of the biggest stars in the sport. The fact that he beat Adesanya, and it wasn't just like a fluke, well, maybe not a fluke KO, but it wasn't a knockout. It was domination for 5 rounds. That's what makes it more impressive. So for me, Sean Strickland's had a career-changing year this year. He's got so much more fans. He's the champion. He's way more popular than he was. Strickland, this year has been amazing for him. And imagine he fights again. Imagine in like December, because he could actually fight again. For all we know, he could be like the co-main event of UFC 295, or he could be on the UFC 296 card defending his belt against either like Dricus or something. We don't know, but he could actually fight again this year. So already he's got 3 wins, 2 finishes, and one of them was one finish actually, right? Yeah, 1 finish. But this year has been absolutely amazing for Sean Strickland. So I'm going to go 2023. Next up, his opponent that recently lost, Israel Adesanya. Everyone hates him, but we've got to give him credit. 2019. Now, Adesanya's definitely out of his prime. You know, he's lost this year to Sean Strickland. 2022, he got beaten by Alex Pereira. I think it was 2020. It was either 2020 or 2021 where he lost to Jan Blachowicz. 2019, for me, was a flawless year from Adesanya. First of all, he beat Anderson Silva. This was Anderson Silva, I mean, listen, he was washed at this point. I'm not going to pretend he was washed at this point, but it's Anderson Silva, and I kind of saw it as like a passing of the torch. I kind of saw it as the new coming of Anderson Silva. Now, I'm not saying that Israel Adesanya is Anderson Silva. He's nowhere near Adesanya. I can't speak. He's nowhere near Anderson Silva when it comes to resume. But he beat Anderson Silva. That's the torch passing. He had an insane fight with Kelvin Gastelum, which is one of the best fights in the UFC, to be honest. That I kind of missed the Adesanya that fought Gastelum, the one that was prepared to die. This Adesanya was something different, man. He had a war with Gastelum and he won. And obviously he got one of his most famous knockouts against Robert Whittaker this year as well. Slept him in round 2. This year was amazing, you know. Like I said, win over Adesanya, win over Anderson Silva, war with Gastelum, and a knockout over Whittaker. What more could you want? And he actually became champion this year as well, so that's just the cherry on top of all of this. So 2019, for me, is the year that actually made Adesanya the guy he is. Got him on the cover of UFC 4, made him a huge star, got him all of these highlights, you know. The amount of highlights that Adesanya got this year. In 2018, he was a prospect. 2019, he was one of the biggest stars in the sport, and yeah, you've got to go Adesanya for 2019. Flawless year, 1 finish, 2 wars. You can't ask for more from Adesanya. Can't ask for more from this year. Like I said, I missed this Adesanya. I don't really like the current Adesanya. I missed the Adesanya that we had in 2019. So I'm going to go Adesanya had a flawless year in 2019. Next up, this is one of the better ones. We have Conor McGregor in 2015. People always bring up 2016 McGregor. How is it 2016? It's definitely 2015. I mean, first of all, he got the iconic knockout over Jose Aldo this year, which is probably his biggest win ever. The knockout over Jose Aldo. 13 seconds, he slept one of the greatest featherweights of all time. So that happened this year. So you can already say that, you know, this year's been amazing for Conor McGregor. He actually became champion this year as well. So we came into the year as a non-champion, ended the year off as champ. And he had an absolute war with Chad Mendes. And he finished every opponent within 2 rounds. Every opponent was finished within 2. Not a single one of his fights went to decision. So you've got to give it Conor McGregor. Listen, this is the year that made him a sport. And not a sport, that made him a star. And I know the thing is with Conor McGregor, it wasn't just 1 year that made him big. It was the lead up to his UFC debut. It was the first couple of fights in the UFC. Obviously, he's had a long kind of prime from like 2013 to 2016. But 2015 was definitely his most impressive year for me. He was unstoppable this year. Nobody was taken out of this McGregor. Some people even say, I'm not saying this, but some people in the MMA community say that 2015 McGregor, the featherweight McGregor, would beat every single fighter in featherweight history. I don't know how to feel about that. I'm not saying, but you know, people are saying that. But yeah, 2015 McGregor was something different, man, and now he's kind of just a cokehead in Irish pubs. Doesn't really know what to do with his life. Doesn't know if he wants to fight or not. Doesn't even know who he wants to fight. 1 minute he's calling out Michael Chandler. The next minute he's saying he wants Alexander Volkanovski. Recently he's been saying he wants Sean Strickland. I don't think he has a clue what he wants to do with his career. But either way, 2015 was a huge year for McGregor. But anyway, next up, Jorge Masvidal 2019 now. Unlike McGregor, this is the year that made Jorge Masvidal. If 2019 didn't exist, I can guarantee most people watching this video wouldn't know who Masvidal was. I'm not saying Masvidal was a complete bum before 2019. He was still kind of a prospect, but this is the year. This was an absolute flawless year for Masvidal. It got him on the cover of UFC 4. I mean, he started off the year. He'd had a little layoff, and he fights Darren Till in his hometown. And this fight, it was supposed to be Masvidal getting ruined. This fight was supposed to be the Darren Till's kind of, like, I don't know how to say it, like his raise to fame. This was supposed to be the fight that got Darren Till popularity. Masvidal ruined the plans. What they expected to happen was Masvidal goes and fights Darren Till in London, or wherever it was. It might have been Liverpool. I don't know where it was. I think it was London. But either way, fights him in England and was, you know, going to get slept or beaten by Darren Till, and Darren Till was going to go on and live a career. But Masvidal ruined that. He got one of the most brutal knockouts against Darren Till in his hometown. After this, he had a massive fight with Ben Askren where they were trash talking each other. Only goes and gets the fastest knockout in UFC history, which he still holds the record for. And then he ends off the year by having a super fight with Nate Diaz, where he absolutely battered him until the doctor stoppage and became the first BMF champion. And he became a superstar. He became a superstar. Within 3 fights, this was the year that made Masvidal, let's be honest. He's a superstar now. I know he's lost a lot of his most recent fights. You know, he lost twice to Usman, lost to Colby, and lost to Gilbert Burns, but Masvidal's always going to be a big star just because of this year. And like I said, if 2019 didn't happen, I'm not sure Masvidal would even be a big name. It was his prime. It's almost like Masvidal's prime was all just stuffed into 1 year. Like every great bit of Masvidal's career was picked up and then just thrown into 2019 for him. It was such a good year. BMF belt, 3 finishes. I guess the Nate Diaz one was a doctor stoppage, but it's still a finish. So 3 finishes, fastest knockout in UFC history. Arguably the fight that started the downfall of Darren Till, but this year, you've got to give it to Masvidal. It was flawless. Now we're going to go on to a guy that slept Masvidal. Kamaru Usman. I'm going to go 2021. Kamaru Usman, the Nigerian Nightmare, for me is definitely in top 5 greatest welterweights of all time. He's not had a great past couple of years, obviously. 2023, he's fought once against Leon Edwards, and he got battered. Well, he didn't get battered, actually. It was a fairly close fight, but he lost to Leon Edwards, and he's still not got a fight booked. We're looking at retirement soon. Last year, he got knocked out cold by Leon Edwards in one of the most popular knockouts in UFC history. But the year before that, 2021, you've got to give it. That was a good year for Kamaru Usman. He had a dominant finish against Gilbert Burns. I think that Kamaru Usman that fought Gilbert Burns was prime Kamaru Usman. I thought that's the best Kamaru Usman. The one that fought Gilbert Burns was the best Kamaru Usman. He absolutely dominated and finished Gilbert Burns. It just shows you how there's levels to this division, man. He was the first person to sleep Masvidal, got a brutal knockout over Masvidal, one of the most popular knockouts in the UFC, slept Masvidal, and the first guy to actually sleep Masvidal. I spelled Masvidal's name wrong, but who cares? And then he ended off the year with a fun fight with Colby Covington, very back and forth between him and Covington. It was a really fun fight, and he ended up still beating Covington and ending off the year as a champ. So you've got to give it to Kamaru Usman, man. 2 finishes and then 1 fun fight with Colby. Some people like to say that Colby won the second fight, but I think Usman won the second fight. But either way, you've got to give it to Usman, man. 3 dominant performances, slept Masvidal, dominated Burns. I think this is prime Usman. He's just not the same anymore. Ever since that head kick knockout, he's just not been the same. I think what we do with Usman now is we give him a fun fight with Shavkat Rakhmonov. If he loses that, in fact, no, win or lose, I think he retires, man. If he loses to Shavkat, I think he has to call it quits. I mean, he's approaching, I don't know how old he is, but I'm pretty sure he's old. He's lost his last 2. One of them was him getting slept, and he's got really bad knees. He hasn't fought in ages, so I'm going to say Kamaru Usman, he's going to have to retire now. But 2021 was definitely the year that made Kamaru Usman this big star in the UFC. And finally, we're going back to 2016, and I'm going with Michael Bisping. The one-eyed freak, Michael Bisping. Yeah, this was a huge year for Bisping. Before this year, he was kind of like, I don't know how to say it, kind of like the British trash-talking version of Marvin Vettori. His career wasn't really going anywhere. No one thought he was going to be champion. Most people thought he was a very basic fighter. Some people called him the gatekeeper. But this year really made Michael Bisping who he is today. First of all, he became British champ, right? He was the first ever British champion in the UFC by knocking out Luke Rockhold in one of the most shocking knockouts in the UFC. Yeah, Rockhold's chin was definitely tested, but the knockout over Rockhold and then becoming the champion was absolutely incredible from Bisping. He also beat Anderson Silva, and this is a more impressive Anderson Silva than the one that Adesanya beat. This was Anderson Silva closer to his prime. I'm not saying it was absolutely prime Anderson Silva, but he beat Silva. Bisping beat Silva, and that was when Silva was close to his prime. And he got his get back on Dan Henderson. Obviously, we know Dan Henderson back in the day got an absolutely brutal knockout over Michael Bisping, and Bisping was able to get his get back on Dan Henderson this year as well. So we got a get back on Dan Henderson. He beat Anderson Silva and he became the champion by finishing Luke Rockhold. It was a flawless year from Michael Bisping. You've got to give it to him. It's an absolutely flawless year. Yeah, this was the year that made Michael Bisping. Arguably, he wouldn't even be on commentary if 2016 didn't exist. You've got to give it to Bisping. But that is my list for UFC fighters who had a career-changing year. Please let me know if you agree or not, or if I missed any fighters out. Maybe there's some current champions that have a year like this, but yeah, thank you for watching.